Are you doing the curling on the weekend?
Nope.
Not coming curling?
I'm going to improv. It's on a Saturday, right?
Yeah.
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 We'll
Am
get
I
you
on
out
your
to
team,
curling
Aaron?
next year, Sylvia. You'll never wanna
We'll get you out to
improv?
improv next
Nah,
year.
that won't happen.
Why not?
Linus would do it.
I know he
I think
would.
it'd be fun.
Would it? Yeah.
That's Linus, not me.
You'd probably be good at it too. Like, get outside of that comfort zone, Aaron.
Yeah. I think the mistake people make is that they think they have to be funny, and you're not. The situation is funny,
That's good
right?
because
It's
Aaron's not funny at all, so
no, I know. He's a tight ass.
welcome to the Living the Dream podcast.
Yeah.
Today we've got a special guest on, Sylvia MacNeil. She's the manager of our Hamilton office, and she's got an amazing background in prospecting, and she brings a lot to the table. So, Sylvia, I want to start off by just asking you a bit about your background and like how it is that you got into real estate and where your knowledge all came from.
Sure. So my background is a big part of my working life in my 20s and 30s was in hospitality. So I was very comfortable speaking with people. I was actually in hospitality when I decided to get into real estate. I had so many realtors and real estate lawyers coming into my office, and they seemed so confident and sure of themselves. So there was an attraction right away. I was selling real estate statistics. It's a program to agents all across North America. And as I started following the culture behind real estate, I loved the personal development that was associated with being a realtor, that you have to develop and grow personally in order to grow professionally. So that was really what attracted me to the industry. And when I came in as an appointment setter, I was still taking my course and I was just told, make these calls and set these appointments. So I did. I didn't know it was hard to do. I just did it because I was told to. And I set a lot of appointments. When I got my license and went out on my own, that's just what I knew to do. So I grew my business from cold calling and hosting open houses. So that was where the biggest chunk of my business came from at the beginning. And while I was doing that, I was utilizing social media so that my friends and family could see I was actually busy in the business. So, yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And one of the biggest reasons we brought you on today is because of the background that you have in the, I'm going to call it pounding the pavement, especially like the cold calling side of things with scripting and just having that yourself armed with that knowledge.
Actually, I talked to Sylvia this morning about some of the topics we wanted to discuss today. And I thought it was very interesting, some of the things that Sylvia is doing in the Hamilton office, especially with the scripting. And we, of course, brought up the improv and what Sylvia does for improv. So what a great tie-in to what agents do from a prospecting perspective, whether it be open houses at the door. Isn't it improv? Sylvia, why don't you go into that connection and how you're able to get your agents more comfortable talking to people?
Well, it's interesting. There's an interesting alignment with real estate, and improv is essentially responding in the moment without thinking, right? Without having to think. As soon as you start thinking or trying to be funny or anything like that, you've lost it. There's such a pushback with realtors around scripting, around scripts, because we all get these phone calls and you can tell somebody's reading something or it's not personal, it's not warm, they've interrupted your day and they don't care and you hang up the phone. And that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about scripting in real estate. What we're talking about is having practice conversations so that you know the answers when somebody comes to you with an issue, a concern, a problem. You already know, you don't have to think about it or go find it out because you've practiced with your partner.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it is about finding those problems that you can solve, right? And then
Yeah,
being able to handle those either objections or overcome or solve their problem. And then go, you're the person I need, right? You're the person, you've got the information that I require in order to solve my issues. Therefore, they'll want to work with you. So,
that's right.
right?
If I could just give an example.
Oh,
So, one of the things I've done in Kingston with Linus, and Eryn wasn't there for when I did it, was the cold calling.
Mhm.
And I have a script, but it's genuine. And so this was the best way to show agents that this is not a script, a read from a piece of paper type of cold call. And what it is, I have a buyer, whether I'm a new agent without a buyer or an agent that actually has a whole database of buyers, I can go to my colleagues and find out, who are you looking to find a home for right now? What are their needs? Who are they? So it's a bona fide family, right? And so I start calling on their behalf. It's a family of four. The wife is pregnant. They're looking to upsize and, they're looking to purchase a home in this area. We were just wondering if you have any real estate plans coming up
Mm.
in the next little while, right? Nobody has ever I think I've had, out of thousands and thousands of calls, 2 negative responses. People respond positively to, "I'm trying to help this family out. It's just a quick call." So it is a script, but it doesn't sound like one, right? And because it's real, it's based in reality. There is a family looking to move into this area. I'm trying to help them. Do you have any real estate plans?
And after you did that session in the Kingston office, you'd be shocked how many of our agents are like, "Oh, this is an amazing idea." First off, the fact that you say this is just a quick call, that really resonated with everybody. And I start training like that now too. Like you start, "Oh, hey, this is just a quick call." So it settles people down to realize they're not getting drawn into like a very long conversation. Oh, it's just quick. Like, I'll answer their questions quickly because it's just a quick call. Right. But then
Yeah.
also having that good reason. And it's just an icebreaker, right? Like you've talked about that before. If they're not maybe selling in the near future, maybe they know someone. Then you can start talking to them and start building rapport and having like a little bit of a conversation with them too. I mean, we were talking yesterday, Sylvia, before the pod, just talking about topics we're going to talk about on the podcast today. And one thing that I really liked is that you're saying that script, it's a typed out thing, but you don't just sit there and read off a piece of paper, right? You commit them to memory so that you know all the points. You were drawing an analogy to acting and how you rehearse and you get to know your lines. And then when it comes time for the performance, you can actually put your performance behind it. You don't have to think about the words because they're just up here, right? So you
Yeah.
could riff on them a little bit if you need to, but then you already know it. So it's just, you don't have to have that mental block of trying to remember what the next line is on the script. So I really like that kind of analogy. I think that's a really good way to put it. So when
Yeah.
you were talking about having agents look at scripts, you had a bit of a process for it, right? About how they take that commit to memory and move on. So what would your advice be for an agent who is looking at scripts for the first time and getting ready to make that first call? Like, how would that process look? You know?
Yeah. So I would say leave the improving behind. In acting, it's called a table read, right? So we sit down at the table together, and instead of practicing on my client or practicing on the audience, I'm practicing with my colleague. So we go through it, we drill through it, we learn it. I go home, I commit it to memory. Then I come back the next day and I sit down with Linus and Eryn at the table and we do it again. And now I know it. Now I'm at an open house and I know it. So I know the market. We've talked about different objections to various things like signing in at an open house, why it's important. Just send me properties is a common one, right? I don't want to sign anything, or I don't want to go anywhere, just send me properties. So there's objection handles, but then there's a guided script to help you give value to that client. My advice is, on the days leading up to that, sit down and script with somebody, right? And read it right from the paper. Read it right from the paper. And when it comes down to a live conversation, you're going to remember it because the cues are all in the common conversations that take place in an open house or wherever. And another thing too, the best way to have great conversations is to ask questions, right? Not to give information. Ask questions first, find out who the other person is that you're speaking with because you don't know anything about them. And the danger, especially with new agents, I find, is making assumptions.
So asking questions, you had said, and I hear that a lot in terms of building a relationship in 5 minutes, because a lot of times it's a 5 minute conversation. It could be at an open house, it could be at a door, it could be at the grocery store. Oh, I noticed you're, wearing a C21 pin. Are you a realtor? So you got 5 minutes to impress them. I think when I've been taught in the past, the question I said, where do you go from there? What kind of questions are you asking them? I'm not a fan of scripts, but I love what you're saying, because you're not scripted if you just practice something and then take the script away. You just know what to say now. So you're not
Right.
scripting. Anyway, so I'm going to ask you that question again. How do you get there? How do somebody bumps into you, C21 pin, how do you start off that conversation? You're a realtor. Oh, yes, I am. Have a nice day. And you walk away.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it too. We want to talk, we don't stop and engage. And I'm guilty of that too. Um, Everybody's favorite topic is themselves. It's their children, it's their
Yeah.
home, it's their finances. I mean, of course it is, right? I mean, we have these survival instincts and these all point to it. So Ford is a great acronym for us to go by in terms of like a rule of thumb. We ask about FORD, family, occupation, um, uh, what am I missing here?
Recreation?
Recreation and dreams. Yes.
Yeah.
Family, occupation, recreation, and dreams.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks me, oh, you're in real estate. So I say, yes. Are you looking to purchase? Right. So people don't want to be sold and it'll be no, no, no. Right. But typically what people ask is, are you in real estate? Yep. I'm, a C21 agent. And they'll say, how's the market? That's the question that really comes up. And, right now, the market is complicated. Whether you're talking to a buyer or seller, it's a complicated market, right? But I want to know, do they own real estate? Do they know somebody who does? I try to stay conversational around their personal life. And it typically comes out as they trust you, right? Oh, I'm not looking, but actually my sister is, and she's been having a really hard time. There are new rules around first time home buyers. It's a lot easier, but it's still complicated. I'm happy to help, right? And I always come from contribution. I'm trying to help. Here's my card. It depends on how you know this person and how you're speaking with them. If they're a complete stranger, well, it's a little bit hard to close to an appointment. But yeah.
No, it's those open-ended questions too. One of the ones that always came to me was, tell me about your dream home. Where if you were to live anywhere right now, where would you live? Where do you live now? That sort of stuff,
Right.
right? I also find that if you're not prepared for that discussion, you're wearing a C21 pin and somebody says, "Oh yeah, my neighbor's house just sold down." "Oh, what street was that on?" "Oh, that was on Savage Road." Okay, great. And I'm like thinking to myself, I don't know that listing. I don't know that sale. I know nothing about that house. I've lost it, right? You could get it back, but if you knew it and you knew the house and you
Mhm.
went through it because, either were out seeing it on open houses or you did some buyer previews or you on a caravan tour or whatever, you can say, "Oh, the one with the nice picket fence and the basement walkout." And you really know that immediately they're like, "Oh, he's good," right? Like he knows his stuff, and you have them at that point in time, and you can take it to the next level. So I guess preparing with the information and having that knowledge is key, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's 2 things, right? It's the scripting and then the knowledge, and they
Yeah.
they kind of combine together. It's mostly just having all the talking points and information in your head and being able to reference those without second thought, like, so the reflexes. One one analogy I'm gonna use is playing hockey. I'm a horrible hockey player. I play with players that are much, much better than me, and I watch them on the ice, I'm like, they don't have to think, they just do, right? Where I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the puck being like, "Okay, I don't wanna lose, don't wanna lose it." They don't have to think about that because it's just second nature. It just comes naturally, becomes like an instinct. You almost want to get to that point because you're practicing enough, right? And you've had enough experience with like looking over the scripts or having enough conversations. They don't even need to think about what to say. You just do it. And I mean, another similar situation is like something like objection handling too. I've talked to agents who are like, I'm so great at objection handling because they've had so much experience with it. They've almost encountered every scenario. They know what to say in most situations. And to a certain degree, like it's not like they've got a script for it, but it's similar because those things that you could put into a script, they've been committed to memory. And I love how things are just kind of clicking here because Aaron too, like I heard you say before, you never were a big fan of scripts, and I was never a big fan of scripts, but Sylvia's changed my mind about a lot
Yes.
of things and just like different ways to think about it because you're not sitting there with a piece of paper in front of you. Oh, hey, how's the market? Okay, just let me take out my paper and just like read from the script. right?
Yeah.
It's just like you've committed it to memory and you have that at your fingertips, so you can instinctively react to the questions as opposed to having to rack your brain and try and figure out where that piece of information is. I think that's the
Yeah.
important thing.
And
Look,
I think Aaron made a good point too when he said asking open ended questions. I think that you have to start with the idea that you provide a service to people and you need to know who they are and what their needs are. So you have to, in my opinion, you have to come at real estate like that. You need to know instead of just demonstrating all your knowledge, there'll be plenty of opportunity for that. The first thing you need to do is earn trust. And you can't do that without knowing who they are, what they need. It's funny because I was just thinking about this when you said it, Linus. So it's like, I was thinking about the gym. You want to run a marathon or you want to compete or something like that. You can't do that without practice, right? You may be big and strong, but somebody who's been there, toning and working and strength training, and they know the diet and they've been practicing is going to outperform you every single time. So I think also it's important, like with objection handling, that's why it's so important to come into the office and have conversations. What are you seeing out there? We're only working with a couple of eight clients at a time if we're lucky, right? Especially if we're new and we don't have anyone yet. What are the conversations? What are the concerns that are out there in the marketplace?
well, there's
Right?
actually which is kind of like going to the gym, isn't it? Coming into the office, practice, talk to the
Yes.
agents. You're working out, you're working your
Yes.
skills, you're gaining knowledge. I'm a big office proponent because if you're around successful people motivated to get out there and get business done, you motivate you as well, but also gain the knowledge. I was giving you major props there, Sylvia, just with regards to what you've
No.
done in your office and in Kingston, but also how I've taken that approach in my training moving forward next month with listing presentations. And the fact that in the
Oh,
past,
nice.
the way I've done listing presentations is I would teach them how. Well, now I'm going to get them more involved and do role play and say, well, you practice this or you practice that. And let's overcome that objection. And I'm going to morph that into that process because it is very effective. And I think it's the way to learn, learning by doing. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't want to be caught unaware. Like you said, if somebody asks you in the grocery store, how's the market? Or I just sold 123 Savage Street, right? And you're not aware of it. Again, if you don't have knowledge about a particular street, you don't have to freeze there either, right? Practicing having those conversations, I might say something like, well, how was that experience for your brother? Which brokerage did they use? Always go back to asking questions if you're stuck, right?
Mm.
And hopefully you've done enough scripting and role playing that it will turn something on inside your brain that you're like, okay, we can have this conversation, right? And it might lead to we're in a changing marketplace, as you can see from your brother's experience. Would it be of benefit to you to stay updated on the changing market in your neighborhood, right? Because I can always send market reports.
Yeah,
Do
being
that.
prepared to make sure that you can kinda control those "I don't know" situations is very important, and I try and say it to agents all the time. You only have maybe 1 "I don't know" or 2 before they start losing faith in your knowledge and everything, right? So, like, being sure that you have a different way of approaching that, right? Instead of like, "I don't know," be like, "That's a great question. I'm gonna get some clarification on some of that, and I'll get back to you. Can I call you back tomorrow?" Get their
Yeah.
information or whatever. Do a follow-up type thing instead, or like you said, just instead of saying, "I don't know," you just start talking about a different kind of aspect of the conversation, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's especially true with brand new realtors. They feel compelled to display their knowledge, right? And ask questions. Just ask questions, right? I mean, this is the thing, my brother's household or my neighbor's household. And, so how do you see the market? Like, well, how long have you been in your home? Again, everybody's favorite subject is themselves. So if you're curious, you'll be okay. Right? Just keep doing the scripting, keep learning about your marketplace and ask lots of questions,
Actually,
you know?
it's interesting you were talking about that, and it reminded me of one of Chris Leader's seminars, and I can't remember exactly what the overcoming objection handling or why he was talking about it, but he said, "Okay, I want you to hold on to this ball, and every time they ask you a question, I want you to throw the ball back at." Right, so it's the ball back and forth. So it's the asking questions back and forth, and a very strategic way of throwing that question back at them and seeing their thoughts on it before and maybe sometimes you're just processing and looking for the right answer while you're asking them the question
Yeah.
box. But that was really good. And I forgot about that. The one thing that Chris is really good with scripts, right? And as much as, again, I said I'm not a big script person, every time I think about an overcoming objection, I think of how he taught us the script to use. So as much as I said, well, there is obviously very effective is the overcoming objection, right? The objection handling. Everybody has an objection to every sale, right? If you're selling shoes, it could be price, it could be a little uncomfortable, or, and it's the right shoe for them. You say, well, you know, and you overcome it and say, it'll work its way in. But what he taught was the word concerned. And
Yeah.
and it gives you the opportunity to throw that back. So for example, if somebody says, listen, I'm, thinking about using my brother-in-law. And so, oh, I'd be concerned with that. Oh, why are you concerned? Well, because if you're going to use your brother-in-law, how hard would it be if something goes wrong to fire your brother-in-law, right? Like that's a really difficult thing to do, bring family into it. And so and you can use this on your daily life, right? Kids come up to you and they say something like, well, the kids are a bad example. Give me a give me an overcoming objection with your wife or your spouse.
But even with kids, right? Like all my friends have this,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, right.
And so, I mean, because that's a big thing is
That's a
that
good
peer
one.
pressure and they put it on us as parents,
Oh,
right?
yeah. So all my kids have Nike shoes. Well, I'd be
Yeah.
concerned with that. Why are you concerned, Dad? Because if you want to look like everyone else.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think too, I've only met Chris Leader the one time, but one thing he said that really, resonated with me was like, "How much are you talking versus listening?" You know?
Totally.
The reason why I like asking questions is because even though we make assumptions, and it's again, I see it all the time. It's like I've made an assumption that well, I'm looking for a place right now. And a realtor called me and it's a first time home buyer type place. But she assumed that it was me entering the market, but I could be an investor.
Hmm.
Right? And making assumptions is so dangerous. You don't know if you're insulting people.
Yeah.
So it's better to ask questions. And the other thing too is you can uncover somebody else's assumptions, right? That maybe they can't afford this place or that they can't get into the market because they have poor credit, right?
Yeah.
So asking questions and then listening at least twice as much as you're speaking.
Yeah. Be careful in the
Yeah.
questions you ask. I always remember this in retail. I have a retail background and it was always taught to us never ask what your price range is. Right?
Ah.
Yeah, right. Because you could, if you ask, so what are you looking to spend? Oh, that's a personal question. And because you don't, I mean, it would be better to ask questions, for example, well, what have you seen so far? Right.
Mhm.
And then they say, well, we saw this one over on John Street. It was 7.99. So now in and around the ballpark. And then you can start asking other questions to determine, their price range without coming out and saying, what do you have? Because, it can come across a little strong. What
Yeah.
do you pre-approve for? Right.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Because the trust has to be established first.
Yeah.
And, we were talking earlier about open house.
Mhm.
Did you wanna
Yeah,
talk about that a little
sure.
bit? Because
It's a big
yeah,
topic now because of some of the regulatory changes and what can you ask and what should you be doing? And you're trying to pick up some clients, but at the same time, you're trying to sell for the seller. How do I do this?
right? And when does the guide get sent out?
Right.
And at what point are you, from doing a seller service to the seller by hosting the open house to advising the client and getting into representation, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I think, if you're talking to somebody at an open house and, you explain the house and, do you have any questions about it? Is this something you think you'd be interested in?
Right.
And if they say no, my next question is, well, how long have you been looking? Oh, we've been looking 2 or 3 months. Okay, so are you just going to open houses or are you working with a designated representative? We've been talking to different agents. Oh, okay. So you've been talking to different agents. I always acknowledge, right? You've
Yeah.
been okay, great. And so has anybody ever sat down with you and talked to you about all the ins and outs of buying a home, the whole process from beginning to end? All the paperwork involved, the extra expenses? And they'll say no. because nobody does a buyer consult. It is the most underserved portion. And so, well, what I would like to do for you is have you come by the office so I can show you all of the paperwork involved, everything that's going to be so that you're ready when you find that home that you like. Also, all the different costs associated so you're not surprised. And we can look at different homes on the MLS. I'll get your wants and needs and we'll find something that fits. And if we do, we'll go out and see it as well. I mean, how does that sound? And what works better for you, daytimes, evenings, or weekends?
And those buyer consults are an amazing way to develop that trust and everything as well too. And you said it was a very underserved strategy or tactic, right? And one thing that actually happened a couple weeks ago, I was helping one of our agents avoid like a multiple representation situation off a sign call. So I was like, okay, I can help out on the buy side. So I sat down with the prospective buyers. At the very, very beginning of the conversation, it's like, well, we've got my friend in Toronto who's like looking to like help us. I'm like, gosh, that's fine. How about I just show you all the information, no skin off my back. I'll explain everything to you. But then by the end of it, we sat down for about half an hour, went over everything. He's like, that was like really no one's ever explained all this stuff to us before. I'm like, oh.
Yes.
So he's like, yeah, okay. I think we actually do want to like, use you for representation lines. I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Like, and I saw that exactly what you're saying. And then, like I said, it was just a couple weeks ago in action. And they own a restaurant in town. Went to the restaurant the other day and he said, like, yeah, me and my sister, they said like the stuff that you said in that conversation, like the amount of explanation you went to, like we've never seen that before. And we were really impressed. And I was like, yeah, there you go. Right. There's a little
Yep.
anecdote to kind of back that up too. And not enough people do that. Right. They just
And
say,
that's how you build a book of business.
yeah,
And that's how
just
you don't have to give cash back when people ask, because that seems to be a big thing. Right. So if people are like, it is my number one thing to teach agents is buyer presentation. So I'm a huge proponent on what you two are saying. Like it almost puts hair up on my arms. Like, oh my God, that is the key to buyers, right? And when you sit down with them and you go through all that process, they do not undervalue you then. They don't look for cash back because they think you're just a glorified, nothing against Uber drivers, but Uber driver that goes out, buys a Tim Hortons, gives them a coffee and shows them houses, puts an offer in and expect that's all they're doing. And that's all they're worth is somebody to drive you around. And that's not what we are. Right. So, and
Yeah.
yeah,
And I liked what Linus just talked about because where you go from an order taker to a consultant and, sitting down and helping somebody with no pressure, like, buyers they don't feel protected. But it is how you build a book of business because they leave that knowing that they've been cared for in the whole transaction, right? And following up. And I think Century 21 has a great touch system so it's all taken care of for you. You don't have to think about, oh gosh, I've forgotten to say happy anniversary or, to this past client, right? Because it's all there in reminders and there's a drip system. But that's how you build a book of business is creating trust, right? It's not so much the scripts are only there so that you're able to have conversations where you're actually helping people because you have the information. You're not thinking about it, going to get it, coming back. You know it, and then you can deliver it.
soon as you believe in yourself and you believe in the knowledge that you have, and if somebody used somebody else other than me, I'd be concerned because they don't have my knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I'd be concerned if my family didn't ask me for my advice when they're purchasing. And that is the concern is that, or the confidence that you will get with knowledge. So, and
Yeah.
even as a brand new agent into the business, you can be very knowledgeable and you can be super knowledgeable just from the properties that are on the market. The fact that you know more than the top agent in town about this one niche, right? Top agent in town does so much business, they're not paying attention to what's happening over here. You have the knowledge and you can gain that knowledge fairly quickly in terms of, area influences, property values, things that affect maybe the municipal guidelines and rentability of the property. And there's a ton of things to gain the knowledge over the competitors. And as soon as you have that knowledge, you want to spread the word. You get excited about it. You start to really like, and they feel that excitement and they feel that confidence in going with you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 And the one thing too that you started talking about there too, Aaron, is the confidence, right? And I think that's another part of this whole puzzle is that, scripting practice,
Yeah,
knowledge that arms you to become confident in these conversations. Because when you're talking to someone, if you're nervous and stuttering and looking around and you don't have those answers right away, that portrays them that maybe you are uncertain. But if you have that confidence, if you have that knowledge at your fingertips, if you have the confidence to speak eloquently to them, that is a huge part of developing that relationship. Because as soon as you start stuttering and back wheeling, that's when you're gonna lose people pretty quick.
totally.
Yeah. And if the so just going back to an open house example, if the people coming through are the ones asking all the questions, it seems counterintuitive, but the person asking the questions is the one who seems the most knowledgeable, right? If, I'm just being interviewed by somebody and not in a way that's actually going to help them, right? Well, what did this house sell for? And I'm just answering questions. The person asking the questions is the one in control of the conversation, right? So it does give you confidence, knowing your scripts, knowing which questions to ask. You want to know you're putting on this open house for the sellers. Are they interested in the property? Is this something they can see their family living in? No, this isn't really the right house for us. Aaron has a really good technique. He usually goes to see something similar in the area right after his open house, right? But, and if it's not in their price range or whatever, then you start to ask questions along the lines of a buyer consult. Like, it's the only way to have control of the conversation. And when you have control of the conversation and you're able to deliver information that's going to help buyers, you're going to gain in confidence 100%.
What a great conversation! Like, Sylvia, I'm so glad that we had you on today. I feel like every time I talk to you, you change the way that I think about certain things, and that's one of the great things I think that we have as a management team is there's so many different perspectives. It's not everyone thinking the same way. It's other people challenging the way that you think and like making you think about exactly how it is that you're training, you're teaching, you're interacting with clients and everything too. So I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to have you on today. Thanks everybody for watching the show today or listening to the show today. Sylvia, thank you so much for coming on. It was definitely a pleasure. Aaron, thanks as always. Everybody, thanks for listening. Have a great week.
Yeah. Thanks. It was a lot of fun.